Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Momentum webinar on operating principles. Right around the time that I was celebrating 8 years in business and going through the JB 3.0 business renaissance that I talked about on the podcast and in Momentum, I started to get operating principles out of my head and onto paper, actually Google Docs, for the purpose of expanding the team. I realized that there were so many principles and philosophies that undergird everything I do. But if I was going to expand the team, it would be a good idea to make those clearer to others. And then in the process, I also started coming up with more and more that was operating almost invisibly in the background, even for myself. So it's a very interesting exercise. I encourage you to think about what are the principles and philosophies that are underneath the surface of what you do, how you work, how you make decisions, and how you solve problems. That's really what the topic of today is about. So without further ado, let me pull up the presentation. And let's dive in. Little bit about me first. So many of you, if you've been in Momentum or listening to the podcast or reading either of my two books, you'll know the highlights of my background. But for today, I just want to specifically share the company experiences that have shaped my operating principles. For one thing, I was born and raised in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. San Francisco was unique. My mom works full-time and I lived with her full-time, and she went back to work starting at 3 months. So from the time that I was a little baby, and don't worry, this bio is not going to go through my whole life chronology, but from the time I was very young, it was normal that both of my parents worked. Shortly after that, my dad started going into running his own business, and so I saw both my mom going to work every day and the ups and downs of self-employment. My dad's a really creative type, loves painting, singing, all kinds of art making, writing, thinking. And my mom has kind of stayed, you could call it the corporate track. She's been at Stanford for 20 years as the landscape architect. So in both cases, I kind of saw what stability and structure looked like and what self-employment and that roller coaster and the ups and downs, but also the creative freedom looked like. Silicon Valley, where I moved to Palo Alto in 7th grade, a lot of the kids I went to high school with were Stanford professors' children or starting to be involved with the VC world. This was, I don't know, I might have moved in 1996. So just when a lot of the startup tech boom was starting to happen, approaching and leading up to 2001, that was in the water in the area that I lived in. And there was a sense of entrepreneurial spirit. I was always creating little businesses and side hustles and newspapers, even as a kid. I think that was in my bones from the beginning. I graduated high school in 2001. So at the time, I didn't really process that was during this ginormous tech crash that was happening at that time, but certainly was getting exposure to things like Google and very interesting sites and companies that were in the Valley. I went to UCLA and even had side hustles there. I got paid to take lecture notes. I started wondering, how could I earn extra income? I was doing research for one of my professors, but I always had this question of, how can I make the most of the skills that I have and earn a little extra on the side? I don't know why, probably because I was babysitting since the time I was 10 or 11 years old. I just got used to having extra income and creatively asking the question, how can I maximize my creativity, my skill set, and kind of have fun while earning a living. So in college, getting paid to take lecture notes, this was a dream for me. I got to bring my laptop to class. I got to go to extra classes, which I love learning. It was so fun. And eventually I hacked it. So I got paid to take notes for the classes I was actually enrolled in. So in a way, I was getting paid to go to class. And some people would never want to do this because you're losing in some way a competitive advantage that I'm giving all my classmates the notes and maybe we're graded on a curve, but that never bothered me. I really enjoyed it. And even at that time, I was getting paid $50 an hour to do this. So I had this secret parallel dream of being a barista at Starbucks someday, or even in college. I loved Starbucks. But every time I went to go apply, and I actually many times thought about putting in an application, I remember thinking, but I'm earning $50 an hour doing lecture notes. So it never quite added up for me. And I would never say you shouldn't go become a server or a barista. Those were things I thought about doing. I remember when I had recently moved back home after graduating, I walked down to a local pub. It was like a sports pub in the marina of San Francisco. And I tried to get a job there. I thought it would be so fun to work on Monday Night Football nights, but they weren't having it. I had no experience. Why would they accept me? And in a way, always these things are blessings in disguise. So this already was shaping this mindset of experimentation, creative income, always feeling and trying to maintain the belief that there's a way. There's a way. Whatever, if I got behind on my credit cards, it was always not trying to worry too much, but say, well, how can I earn $1,000 by the end of the month? So it always became a question. My first job out of UCLA was at a startup company in Palo Alto. I was the first employee as I grew to 30. I worked for this genius, possibly on the spectrum, Stanford economist professor. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean that he wasn't warm as a personality type, but he was incredibly smart. So that being my first job, even before I had graduated UCLA, shaped a ton of operating principles. How do I show up every day? How do I manage our accounts? How do I work with vendors? How do we grow a business? What is that like? Taking it from me to 30 people. How does he onboard people? How does he manage people? And then after 2 years, as many of you know my story, I pivoted over to Google. And I think of Google almost like getting my MBA, that I was there from 2006 to 2011, and it is really a training ground for working efficiently. I mean, think about how much all of us today use Google products. We were using them from the beginning when they were buggy, when they were still internal. There was always a new tool that we were testing out internally. There was a mantra at Google, eat your own dog food, which was about use your own products so that you spot the bugs more quickly and that we know what features to request. So that 5.5 years, I still use so many of those skills today, dealing with a global organization. When I started, it was 6,000 employees. By the time I left, it was 36,000. So how do you build programs that need to reach 36,000? And even today, I'm still partnering with Google. Some of you know this, but they've chosen Pivot as their global career development framework. So when somebody wants to learn about career development, whether a manager or an individual, it's using the Pivot framework. They did an analysis a few years ago, saw that they had too many overlapping frameworks, knew they needed to simplify, and I just about fell out of my chair when they decided on Pivot. Like, who, me? I couldn't believe it. And I felt like, you have 100,000 employees. I can't believe they're choosing me and the Pivot method. But I think they were just as happy because it was really baked at Google. What you see in the book Pivot, what you've read in the book, so much of that was shaped during my time there. That said, when I left in 2011, there was also a lot that I shifted, and I could not maintain that pace of working at Google, that stress. I also realized something very important when I was there. When I first started, I was working under Sheryl Sandberg, many layers down, mind you. I was not reporting directly to her. But at some point in my tenure there, I looked up the org chart and I realized I don't want to be her. I actually don't want to manage a huge organization and managers of managers. I saw that path of climbing the management ladder and I just realized it's not for me. My whole life I thought I should try to be the CEO of something someday. I don't know why. But that started my pivot towards self-employment. That started me saying, you know what? I actually prefer freedom, lifestyle design, as much as that word has evolved over the years and shifted. Lifestyle design, I want a more easeful existence. I didn't even have the motto at that time, let it be easy, let it be fun. I would have said, you're crazy if you told me back in those days. In fact, I had health problems that I had the whole time I worked at Google. I had a hyperthyroid, I had acne. Even if those doctors, which they didn't put much emphasis on stress, if they had told me, well, these problems are both due to stress, you need to reduce your stress, I would have just said, you're nuts. This is my job. Forget about it. There's no way I was going to change too much of what I was doing, I would never have left simply because they told me, oh, you need to lower your stress. But it was only in hindsight. It was only after I left those problems started to vanish. And when I could set my own schedule and when I could work in a more easeful way, when the only thing I had to think about every month was how to pay the bills. And I know that might sound like a scarcity mindset, which we recently talked about in Momentum. It was very freeing. It was so freeing to have that focus of, instead of 20 objectives and key results every quarter, I just had one, which was pay the bills. And there was so much freedom to that. And I tell this to a lot of side hustlers who are looking to go into full-time solopreneurship, that you would be amazed at what you can accomplish when you have, I won't even say 40 hours a week. I think you can do it in 20 or 30, dedicated entirely, 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week, dedicated entirely toward how are you going to meet your monthly net. You have all day, every day to think about it and strategize and learn from other people. And that's a huge part of what we're doing together here in Momentum. So these 8+ years of solopreneurship have been a huge journey. And it really is solo plus preneurship, because even starting 5 years ago, Marisol joined the team, very first as an intern while she was still at Yale. And I had a VA starting in 2013, so about 2 years in. As soon as I brought the VA on, I realized, oh man, I should never go without this ever again. I would sacrifice just about any other expense in my budget, whether it's meals out or hopefully not fitness classes, something vital to my health and well-being. But I barely go shopping. I gladly accept hand-me-downs from friends like this. That's what reminded me to say it. This shirt is a hand-me-down from my friend Julie. She loves clearing out her closet. She's a big ongoing closet condo fan and advocate. And I'm happy to be right there saying, is there anything you just that no longer sparks joy? And I don't mind. I would rather reinvest that money in my business. If you gave me the choice and you said I could spend $500 on a podcast production team or $500 on a new outfit, 10 times out of 10, I would hire the podcast production team, which I recently have done. That said, when I set up here's a philosophy, here's a principle that is actually not in the presentation. When I book a speaking engagement, I'm allowed to buy one new outfit. So it's coming directly out of the line item, that budget. And it is important to look professional and to feel good in what I'm wearing. So I actually tie my clothing to client engagements and client projects. And that way, that's kind of how I work it. I don't even like shopping. So I'm really thrilled if I only go twice a year, once for spring, summer, and once for fall, winter. That's it. So those are some of my, just even on the personal side, of operating principles. As we talk about Momentum specifically, and we'll get into the principles soon, I thought it might be helpful to share a distilled version of our mission here. And even this could probably be distilled further. I actually think any of you who are here watching, listening, or viewing the recording, maybe you'd know even better than me. But our goal is really help people move beyond burnout, to find flow, freedom, and fun in their work while building heart-based businesses. At its core, Momentum is for side hustlers and solopreneurs. If your business is not full-time, no problem. So many people are doing hybrid businesses these days, hybrid career portfolios or pivot portfolios, where I'm all for having parallel tracks. I think it keeps life and work very interesting. So I know Caitlin's here now. Caitlin's a professor and she does other programs and projects on the side. Amazing. And that professor background and experience and contact with students is so valuable for everything else that she does. So this isn't about saying, oh, everyone has to work toward full-time solopreneurship. That's why I'm always keeping side hustlers and solopreneurs in the same sentence. But our goal is really, how do we help you find more flow, both in the energy sense of going with the flow, but also flow state of really being at your best as often as possible, freedom and fun. That I believe business building should be fun, and it can be. Business building is a very creative process. And when it starts to get stressful and hard and blocked, that's where burnout comes from. And so this notion of moving beyond burnout is not just saying, oh, quit your job or quit your business. It's understanding what is causing that burnout and how do we move beyond it? How do we set ourselves up for fun and freedom and flow in a way that also honors ourselves, our bodies, our free time, your friends and family, anything outside of work that is important to you. The heart-based business piece is just a little more specific. When I think about who I'm most attracted to, I think who is attracted to momentum, there's a certain generosity of spirit, a heartful quality where it's not just all about the money. It's not just all about the numbers. Yes, we are going to set ambitious goals. We are going to push ourselves and stretch and grow and try to earn an easeful living. But it's going to come with a sense of giving and generosity and collaboration and a spirit of care that goes beyond just what you might see on a balance sheet. I love this quote. The path to managing complexity is paradoxically simplicity. Any of you who know me know that I love geeking out on systems and templates. I have a mug that Megan and I were talking about recently called I Heart Spreadsheets. That does exist in my home. But I especially love this philosophy. The path to managing complexity is paradoxically simplicity. So even in this presentation and these operating principles, you could probably pare it down even further. If you made me choose 3 operating principles, I'm sure I could. So I encourage you, take what I'm offering here in this session and pare it down even further. Or anywhere in your business that you feel things are overly complex is an opportunity to simplify even further. What are principles? Before we get into the specific operating principles that I hold and that we now have at JBE, which is Jenny Blake Enterprises, originally my sort of joke name, my ambitious name, when I only had a side hustle, Jenny Blake Enterprises. I just wanted to sound big and fancy, but it's now the name of my LLC. So JBE, if you hear me say that, that's what it stands for. Principles are fundamental truths or propositions that serve as a foundation for a system or of belief or behavior, or for a chain of reasoning. I've italicized the words that jump out here to me because principles could also be about moral principles or religious principles. But for the sake of today and building a heart-based business, principles, whether you might realize it or explicitly know them or not, are already serving as the foundation for systems that you have in your business. And even what's so important, I think, about articulating them, especially if you're looking to expand your team, is that they set in motion a chain of reasoning. So if you and your team are clear on operating principles, hopefully the goal is that you don't have to explain as much down the road. Or when you give feedback, it's tied to a principle. And then it empowers everybody on your team and everybody in the business to have shortcuts to making decisions and to even how to tackle work and workflow. Why do we even need principles for building a heart-based business? You probably already have some, and then others are either hidden or needed. So when I say, you've probably heard me say throughout Pivot or Momentum or any JBE materials that I follow the Agile development saying, each time you repeat a task, take one step toward automating it. You're going to see it later in this presentation. That's an explicit principle that I have followed for a long time in my business. It helps me use shortcuts. I use Text Expander. I use Jump Cut, which is for copying and pasting on the Mac, saving the last 10. I use Evernote for saving and clipping things. I have canned responses, which I like the term I've heard more recently, which is called guided responses. For everything, anything I'm typing more than once, like my home address, my phone number, my email, the Pivot Method URL, the website has a shortcut. So I'm actually only typing in semicolon email, boom, and my email address populates. Or I'm typing in semicolon S-Inc, I-N-Q, like speaking inquiry, 4 letters. The reason I use a semicolon without a space is that you're never typing a semicolon without a space in your day-to-day working, so it wouldn't automatically auto-populate something. But boom, a whole response will go out when a new speaking inquiry comes in. So that's something that has always been explicit, but others are hidden that do guide, but it's almost like maybe I grew up with them, they're in the water, like it's okay to try things. Well, that might be a hidden principle that my parents helped instill in me, because every time I wanted to try a new business, whether it was the neighborhood carnival, selling chocolates down the street, starting a newspaper, they encouraged me. Whereas Michael and I have talked a difference. He tried to kind of like get paid to tutor someone back in Beirut, and his dad said, don't do that. That's not a good idea. That's not something we do. So I have a principle. It's okay to try things. What are your hidden principles that are shaping how you make decisions and what you choose to work on and how you manage or give feedback in your business? And then what principles are needed? So whenever I experience frustration or blocks or stress, I like to look at what's missing here. It's not just the surface level problem. One saying that I have around business may not be true for bigger life events, certainly, because I don't want to diminish really terrible things that happen in life. But when it comes to business, I often say stress is a systems problem. This is a belief or a system for me, or a principle. Stress is a systems problem means that if I'm stressed, there's a solution. There's a system that might not be working properly because it's leading to this stress and frustration and a bottleneck. So be keeping an eye out for areas of friction, frustration, stress, disappointment. That might mean that you have room to create some new operating principles and to shift current beliefs or kind of subconscious principles or programming that you have. The 3 categories of operating principles that I'm going to share have to do with overall approach to the business and team communication, agile systems, automation and documentation, and then community, joy, and generosity. First and foremost, and these are somewhat in order, at least by category, but they're not stack ranked. Like you're getting the number one most important thing and nothing else matters. They're all relatively important. The first one, intention and problem solving. We're constantly asking, what problems would we like solved? We being my team and I. What are we already solving for ourselves? And what is our intention for everything we create? I stole that last one from Oprah, who got it from Gary Zukav. He wrote a book called Seed of the Soul. And after she read that book and had him as a guest on her show, she said that she and her team asked for every single episode and for every podcast of Oprah Winfrey Universe, they ask, what is our intention for this show? So that's something I'm trying to do even more than I currently do, which is what is our intention for this workshop or this program that we're doing, this launch, this email, that we could ask this question for everything we create. And whenever we get stuck, we return to, well, what problems do we want solved? Because sometimes we rack our brains thinking about what our community might want from us. And the answer is right there. Just solve what you need to have solved. That's where Pivot came from. It's where Life After College came from. Outrageous openness is a concept from Tosha Silver. There's a book by the same name. I highly encourage you to read it if you haven't already. This, as it relates to Jenny Blake Enterprises, is following the flow of events, energy, and people. Aim for the highest good for all involved. That's our overriding intention for everything that we do. And trust in perfect timing. So I'll give you an example of following the flow of events, energy, and people. Recently, I was speaking at an engagement in Barcelona, Spain, and we needed to send a box of 250 books. Well, there was a hilarious, but not so funny at the time, comedy of errors that unfolded, which is a good problem to have. Portfolio, my publisher, ran out of books. So already they could only ship 220. And by the way, we got a month early jumpstart on placing this order, which already was an accomplishment. They ran out of books. They simply did not have copies of Pivot that had been printed. There was another printing coming a month from now, but that would be too late. Okay, that's first kind of glitch. No problem. Next thing we did, write to Penguin UK. Penguin, do you have copies of Pivot that we can send? They said yes, we placed the order. When we went to follow up a week later, no order had been placed. They were out of books, but no one let us know. So the next thing we tried was placing an order through Amazon Spain and trying to order these 25 extra books to be shipped from Amazon Spain. Well, the next thing we know, the account got closed because they didn't recognize it. They thought that someone in Spain had hijacked my Amazon account. At this point, Brenna, who was working with me on this, we looked at each other and we just said, this is not meant to be. We could try to force these books to arrive, but it's just not in the cards. It is not going to happen. And we let it go. So we probably even waited on the longer side of reading the signals. But if something's not flowing and it's not working, I'm not afraid to just let it go. Those books were not meant to be there, and it is okay. I'll always try to problem solve, but there's also the sense of going with the flow. And if things are getting blocked, maybe there's a reason. I hold this belief, trust in perfect timing. I recently had a really big contract that I was kind of starting to count on, which is a problem, counting invoice chickens before they hatch, but it got postponed. All I can do is trust that it will happen if it's meant to, and it will be perfect timing whenever it does. And that, in fact, it couldn't have happened a moment sooner. So it's not always easy to do that, especially when that income would have been really helpful right now. But it's what it's allowed me to stay sane all these years, is trusting in perfect timing, and that even the flow of client work, when incoming clients slow down, it must mean it's time for me to work on the business and work behind the scenes because I'm home, I have the time, and I can actually put that focus in. When speaking really picks up and I can barely maintain what's going on in the day-to-day business, okay, must be a time for me to practice delegating and developing systems for when I'm on the road. Let it be easy, let it be fun. I shared this at the beginning. This is really around busting the money and work myths that everything has to be a hard hustle grind. I'll sleep when I'm dead. No. We recently in Momentum talked about the book, The Abundance Code. It's not my favorite on the energetics of money. I much prefer the book, Creating Money, and Tosha Silver's It's Not Your Money. But the Abundance Code is really good at busting 7 money myths like this one, that work is hard and work is a grind, and running your own business is a hustle, and it's who can hustle hardest, fastest. Those are all myths. If you believe it to be true, I personally think that's where burnout comes from. Why can't we ask the question, what would be easy? What would be fun? Sometimes with my team and I, whenever we get blocked on a project, or any of us are frustrated, or we're just not seeing momentum, we just stop and we say, what would be easy here? What would be fun? Part of the reason that Momentum Q&A calls on the regular are not on video is that it fit the let it be easy, let it be fun framework. I just didn't want any of us to worry about being on video, myself included. And I knew I'd be way more likely to show up in whatever I was wearing, whatever I looked like, however I was feeling that day, if I didn't feel the pressure to be on video every single time, though I love doing it for sessions like this one. So for me, letting it be easy and fun is honoring my own preferences and rhythm, and trusting that that's okay for other people too. Sacred third solutions is whenever you find yourself in a tug of war between, oh no, it's either A or B and both feel bad, or you're in even conflict with another person. You want it one way, they want it another. A sacred third solution is saying, what's that third way? Think of a triangle that we haven't even come up with yet. What would be the highest good for all involved? What solution would actually have everybody feeling happy? So I bought a house this year in Harlem. It's a condo. And it came from a sacred third solution question, which was Michael and I were kind of already kind of haggling over if we were first looking for a 1-bedroom, but we realized if we had a guest, where would they stay already? Same problem we had in the studio. Then we were looking at a 2-bedroom. Okay, now there's room for an office, but for who? So already now we're fighting over the office that doesn't yet exist and the 2-bedroom that we're searching for. And still when a guest comes, boom, the office is out the window. So one day after 2 years of searching and going to open houses, I had this aha moment. I was like, we need a 3-bedroom solution. And here's why. You'll have an office, I'll have an office, and we'll have a bedroom. And I just felt like this was the sacred third. I would have said I was nuts to look at a 3-bedroom, but I put it into StreetEasy, the app we use for searching here in New York, and 2 areas came up, Harlem and Brooklyn. And as my friend from New Jersey and I say about Brooklyn, 2 words, never. Sorry, I know many people live in Brooklyn and love it, and there's a lot to love, but I just love the feeling of being hugged by buildings in Manhattan and just the daily scrum that happens on the street. That's a little different in Brooklyn. It's a tiny bit more spread out. So there it was. Harlem was this idea that I had never considered. I lived 123 blocks south of where I am now. It was an hour away by subway. I didn't really venture up this way too often. So, but then that had us go to an open house. We got really curious. And by the following week, I had seen this bookshelf in a thumbnail for a listing. Michael had even already gone to Beirut. He didn't even see the place before I put in an offer. He just saw it on FaceTime. And there it was. So that was our sacred third. And it's how we're here now. And I believe those are always possible in business and whenever you get stuck. Energy intelligence. This is based on the Strength Scope session that's available in Momentum. That in addition to building our strengths intelligence of what we're good at, there's also energy intelligence of what energizes you most and what drains you. I believe that each person can do their best work with the most joy and ease by focusing at least 80% of their efforts only on tasks that feel energizing and exciting. Really. And I think this is something that I didn't learn in the business world. I made it up for JBE, which is that I don't want anyone on my team to be doing more than 20% of stuff they don't like. Maybe it shifts. Maybe they liked it in the beginning. In the beginning, I think Marisol was running a lot of social media, like tweets and all kinds of Facebook posts and all kinds of stuff. Eventually, a person will outgrow that kind of work. It's not personal. I just simply do not want people doing work that doesn't energize them. What is the point? What's the point? There's someone else who will energize them. And what's the point of having a team of people that are like dreading their work? That's just not at all what I'm trying to create. And another principle that, as it occurs to me, is probably not even in this presentation, is I really believe how we work on something is as important, and it actually affects the energy of the outcome of the product of whatever's created. So I'm always trying to have conversations with team members about what's energizing you, what's draining you. And of any work that's draining, we'll brainstorm how we can move it off your plate. What can we drop? What can we delegate? What can we automate? And if that's going to require an entire role shift, that's A-okay too. That's how Marisol's shifting onto special projects and Stephanie's shifting in to Momentum 3.0 community fearless leader. Remote freedom, more and more, especially in Momentum. I'm preaching to the choir here, but remote freedom, at least in my business, I have a philosophy: work from wherever you want, just about whenever you want. Now, of course, I don't have anybody full time. But part of the reason for that is I just want to give anyone who's working with me that freedom, that if it's full time, you're already sort of on the hook to work 40 hours a week. And if it's part-time, 20 hours a week, which to me, I don't even spend that much time in my business. I'm not even full-time in my business. An average week, I'm spending 20 hours, and sometimes it's 10 and sometimes it's 30. But I like the notion that people can work from wherever and whenever they want. Every now and then we're going to have major deadlines or meetings or kind of customer support hours where a certain part of someone's task might be checking in to something at certain times. But Stephanie knows from recently joining, like, she's going to be traveling all over the world, and it doesn't matter to me. It's helpful to communicate and know where someone will be at any given time. When are you going to be off the grid? And if someone's kind of going off the grid or going to be unavailable, for me, it's not a question of if they can. There's no permissions happening, but it's just getting any tasks done before that or delegating anything for that time window if there are things that will need to happen in your absence. A great book for this principle is It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work by the founders of Basecamp. And they also wrote a book called Remote, which I really liked. And they also wrote a book called Rework, but I would tackle them in that order. It doesn't have to be crazy at work. That would actually give you a good gist of what they talk about in Rework. And then Remote is also good specifically for how they manage remote work. Feedback and learning. We invite debate, disagreement, and feedback. Every perspective and opinion counts. Don't be shy. This is something I encourage anyone I work with, don't be shy about proposing changes, upgrades, and solutions. I do not want to be the one that has all the answers or has to make all the decisions, or thinking that just because I came up with some process a year or 5 years ago, that that's the right one. Every person is going to have their own perspective about how we could make something more efficient, what they think. Marisol and I, we were deciding on tools, and we disagreed sometimes about whether we thought we should move forward with implementing a tool. Like right now, we're piloting Zendesk for customer support or not. But we got to understand what each person was thinking about, what were the decision-making criteria, and then always we'll try things and adjust as we go. So I'm always trying to encourage this, and I want everyone on the team to feel that they can always contribute and shape things as we go. Moving on to the second category, agile systems, automation, and documentation. This is a big principle of business planning. Are we Oprah or Tim ready? That's Tim Ferriss, whose podcast I love. The saying used to be like, okay, if you write a book, you want to get on Oprah. Of course, she doesn't have her daily talk show anymore. She does have the podcast, Super Soul Sunday, which I love. And then Tim Ferriss, I love his podcast. It was one of the first ones I listened to. I think he gets 1 million downloads a month. I'm not 100% sure. Whether or not these things actually happen, the point of this principle is not to get on Oprah or have some obsession with getting on the Tim Ferriss show. It's just going through the thought exercise. Would we be ready? If I would be interviewed on a show that had 1 million listeners, would we, our systems and our offerings, be ready for an influx of that many people? Would things break down? Would we be proud of the path that we're taking people on, of what's available, of making sure there are no typos or errors, having a clean, simple web presence, having enough archives for people to peruse, maybe even having a new here section, which we don't currently have, but I used to have. So this is, I'm constantly thinking. And of course, part of the trick of this principle is I never feel fully Oprah or Tim ready, but I get closer and closer with every project that we do. And who knows, you'll all be the first to know. Maybe when I do pass that point of actually feeling ready, maybe something like this will happen. But I am a big believer. Here's an underlying principle. I do believe that if you're not energetically ready, these things won't happen. It's not like, oh, well, if I would get on one of these shows, then I'll hustle and try to turn everything around really quickly and make sure it's all set up. No, I really believe that by getting ready, you show the universe that you are open and available and prepared for the biggest possible opportunities that it can send your way. Automate and document. I've already shared with you my agile development quote that I stole long ago. Each time you repeat a task, take one step toward automating it. But this also is about documentation. So when I give feedback to someone on my team or give instructions, I'm always asking, please also add this to the manager manual. The goal here is to try to get as much information out of any one person's head and onto the page. So let's say somebody's traveling or going to go off the grid for 2 weeks. Well, it's much easier to do that if everything about your role and your tasks and your projects is already documented. And you don't have to scramble to document it right before you go on vacation. It's already there because as we work, as we go, we're documenting things and documenting steps and creating recurring tasks in Asana, creating subtasks for more complex things. That way, we're always ready to go, and we can always replicate existing tasks or systems for easier processes moving forward. Batching is huge. As soon as someone joins, I'm always saying, batch your tasks. I do not want anybody responding to email all day, incessantly in the background. I mean, I have to break myself of that bad habit. But by keeping Asana open while working, batch low priority and low volume or not things that aren't time sensitive. So responding to tickets in Zendesk, that can happen 1 hour a day. Or for Brenna, the person who's the point person on that, 2 check-ins a day. That's it. We don't currently have a goal that every single person who writes will get a 20-minute turnaround. I think checking in 2 batches a day is perfectly fine. Something like pulling down transcripts from the Momentum Q&A calls. It just doesn't have to happen right away. It's only for our internal use. The transcripts don't worry, you're not missing anything. They're like auto-generated, so they're not even that accurate, but it helps me search in Evernote for topics I might have covered and when. But that can happen once a month. Updating a stats dashboard of all our stats across the podcast, the newsletter, courses, that can happen once a month. There's no need. I'm not somebody obsessed with metrics that I need to see them every single day. Part of this is also working to eliminate task bloat for low priority items. Sometimes something is not a priority, but for some reason, it just has become bloated and that takes extra time. And we look at the Harvest, which is the app most on my team are using for time tracking. We look at Harvest and we see, that one task took X number of hours this month and X number of dollars. Let's find a way to streamline it. So sometimes tasks get bloated without you even intending for that to happen. They accumulate over time. And then, as is the case, what's happening this year is sometimes there's new software that's come out that makes things that used to be tricky really easy. An example is when people purchase a Pivot workbook. I used to outsource to a VA team, getting the PayPal order, going into Vervante, our distributor, placing an order, emailing the customer. Turns out Vervante will do that automatically. So as soon as a workbook is purchased, we just forward PayPal now to them, and no one on my team needs to do it. But for over a year, we were having many manual steps around that process. So I also encourage you to revisit from time to time tasks that you think need to happen manually and see if there's not new tools or systems available to you. Proactive problem solving. I strongly believe we should all be trying to work ourselves out of a job. And what that means as well is owning solutions. So I read this in the Basecamp books, especially it doesn't have to be crazy at work. I'm pretty sure that's where I read it, but I'm of the mind as well of don't just say, oh, this thing is broken, or here's a problem. Here's a problem, and here are 3 things I propose of fixing it. Or here's a tricky email that just came in. Here's a proposed response. Everybody should own the solution of the things that they own. And it's not because I don't want to be the bottleneck of all problem solving that happens. Similarly, we should all be trying to work ourselves out of a job. I should be constantly thinking, what else can I delegate? What else can I delegate? And for the people on my team, what else can I automate? What else can I automate? How can I make this easier and easier so that more and more time continues to get freed up? And then we can all keep evolving. We can all keep moving on to more sophisticated, creative work and the work that we really love, the work that energizes us most. Coupled with this is one clear owner. Every task or group of tasks should have one clear owner. It gets very confusing. I don't like co-owning something. Even if the person who owns it is going to CC others or ask for feedback, they're the ones project managing that, taking it from start to finish. And I wrote a note on this slide for business owners. This means get your grubby meat hooks off of everything. Let go. That was a note to myself. Meat hooks came from Bart Simpson in a Simpsons episode. He called them like his hands meat hooks. And I don't know, it makes me laugh. I'm the guiltiest of this, is like peeking over what's going on and jumping in or sort of being unclear about who owns something. And it's something I'm constantly working on. But ideally, everything has one clear owner. Even if you, the business owner, are giving feedback along the way, in general, I don't want tasks assigned back to me. Unless something's waiting on my review, I like the person to keep owning it until it's finished. So what this means is, let's say with the books to Spain, if I say, place an order for 250 books to get to Spain. Well, that does not get marked complete when the order is placed. It gets marked complete when 250 books have arrived in Spain. Before that outcome, the person still owns it, and they're the one to follow up and check in. And that sounds like a very obvious example, but there are a lot of times where a task gets assigned and it gets marked complete, and it's just the first step. So something I'm always asking people on my team to do is anticipate. If you were me, what would you want to happen next? So I used to have this issue a lot with previous VAs where I would say, please register for this event. The best VAs would register and automatically put it on my calendar with all relevant details. The VAs that I didn't think were as strong and proactive would just register for the event. But then I would have to follow up and say, great, now can you please add it to my calendar? And then they would, and it'd be the wrong time zone, or it wouldn't even have the description from the event in the calendar description. So I love a sense of proactivity here of like, register for the event also means take it all the way to the finish. If I'm saying buy plane tickets, which I actually book my own travel because I prefer it, but if I say book plane tickets, a proactive follow-up would be, great, do you also need a ride to the airport? Be on the lookout for bottlenecks. If the flow of work is a river, where are the eddies? Where is the water stagnant? And where are the turbulent rapids, either now or up ahead? We have a bottleneck buster template to help you observe for 2 weeks where the bottlenecks are. I am always finding bottlenecks. This goes back to stress is a systems problem, that this happen all the time, and even with the best of intentions. And it's very easy, I can at least say, as the owner, founder, and used to kind of working more and more by myself in the early days, I'm the biggest reason for bottlenecks. Sometimes projects will get stopped up because there's not clear next steps. Sometimes there's something going on in the person's personal life where something's getting bottlenecked, and we've got to just inquire and see if we need to redistribute the work. What could get bottlenecked? So I'm a big believer, let's say we're planning for a momentum relaunch. Get every single thing done in advance that could possibly be done in advance. And this has been true for my book launches as well, at least when I do it right. I learned a lot from the first launch to the second. And with Pivot, I really wanted to have every single thing done in advance so that by the time the book was launching, I could focus on in the moment, real-time things that were coming up, questions, engaging on social media, inquiries that started to come in from potential clients, not finishing up the Pivot toolkit or something that could have been done 2 months prior. Track hours, this is kind of in the back end. I don't even know if this is a principle, but where it becomes a principle is tracking hours is not for me, the owner, to just micromanage and like check in and hover over someone's shoulder. Like, how did you spend every minute of your time? It's for us to together to understand, how's the balance of our work? Are we putting the most time and effort and energy into revenue generating activities? If there are low level, low priority tasks that are taking a lot of time, can we do something about them? Can we shift them? So this is more about each person and I together looking at this time to importance ratio and just trying to continue to refine. And again, it's not about me being like the big bad boss. I hate the word boss, but trying to cut costs. But I will say that sometimes when we see that something takes a long time, there's often a better solution even for the person involved. Maybe we help free up their time or make something more efficient even for them. So I think of it as a win-win for everybody. Words matter. If you've been in the momentum orbit for a long time, you know this is really important to me. Listeners, members, and community, these are the words I use, not fans, followers, users. Fans just sounds so condescending to me. But a lot of people use it. Oh, my fans. Ugh. I just picture, I can't stand it. Okay. So podcast listeners, not podcast fans. Momentum members. Pivot community. Pivot list community. JB community. But I'm never saying Pivot followers, even Twitter followers. I know that the social media themselves use these words. Users, it's like addicts. You know, I read somewhere this meme that the only two things that use the word users are apps and drugs, basically, where we apply this label to people. Not for me. I do pay attention to the words I use. I even have sprinkled in throughout this that I don't love the word boss. I don't love the word employees. I say team members. You probably notice me saying that as we go. Share openly. This is one of, it got added more recently, but truth while it's fresh. Agile, easy, radical transparency. This is becoming more and more clear. I've always tried to find my capital T truth of the moment and share it out with my community from the earliest days of life after college. But we're trying to do even more of it in Momentum, which is just truth while it's fresh. I mean, that day, that week, not saving that as some future topic that we then talk about in a month from now. It's like, how do we share in an easy way radical transparency and be agile about that. Like agile meaning, again, we're not then adding it to some project plan that takes months and months to get out. We're posting in Facebook. We're doing a session like this to keep peeling back the curtain and keep providing transparency to the extent that it's helpful. Strive for excellence in all that we do, from big ideas to delightful surprises to every final detail. Excellence is a value of mine. It is in everything that I do. I will say I balance it with get scrappy, as I talk about in Pivot, a Google mantra. Launch and iterate, be scrappy. I'm not a perfectionist often when it comes to launches. I'd rather get 80% of the way there and ship, get something out the door, than tighten up every last final detail with the branding and the imagery and the stock photography. That's not my style. But I do want to be excellent, particularly in the teaching, the resources, and the experience that all of you have. I love trying to find delightful surprises whenever we can. And we do pay attention to the details. Sometimes things need to get launched and get out. Then we can go clean up details. So they don't always have to happen at the same time. Fair solutions. Customer is right. I generally take that perspective. You know, there's the phrase, the customer is always right. It's just a drain of time and energy so many times to argue with people. So I don't beat myself up. I don't say, oh, I'm such a pushover. I'd rather be done with it than like chase down here. Same goes for chasing down copycats. Really, if people ask for a refund, we do everything we can to give it, unless we feel like it's totally unfair given maybe they've been a member of Momentum for 2 years and they're now asking for a refund on all 2 years because, oh, I forgot it was there. Well, no, but we'll meet you halfway. So we're trying to look for, not always even halfway, but we'll try to find a solution. Or, well, why don't you go register for every course just so you have the lifetime access before we close you out? Or we can refund this last quarter. But in general, I really do not spend my time or energy trying to argue with a customer that isn't happy. I want to make them happy. I'd always rather make them happy and even give a refund for certain types of products or inquiries than delay. Even with the Pivot workbook, which is a physical it's not hardcover, but it's a physical tool that gets mailed out. Good old analog. Even that, if there's shipping problems and something goes wrong, I just refund the order and we still figure out the shipping and how to get it to the person. Because why should they pay if they're waiting like over a month to get this? It just doesn't seem right. Okay. So before we move into the Momo 3.0 section, I would love to know if you have any questions. And I'm going to go back because I realized this slide got missed somehow, which was that third section is around community joy and generosity, radical transparency, and delightful specificity. These are definitely our mantras moving forward in Momentum. But also community joy and generosity is how do we spark joy for all of you who are here on an ongoing basis? And how can we be always and ever more generous with what we're figuring out, what we're learning, and sharing that out with all of you? Okay. So with that, I would love to pause and see if there are any questions. Okay, feel free. Oh, Kevin adds one, and feel free to add more in the chat. Kevin asks, can you talk about how you track hours? Do you do it daily, weekly, etc.? There's a great thread in Momentum about this that actually Alyssa and Stephanie were going back and forth on. I use Rescue Time, which is a plugin for the computer that tracks how you're spending time. And for me, it tracks laptop time because sometimes I'm working from my phone or I'm pacing around the house taking a call and it's not getting tracked, but it tracks for me laptop time. And Alyssa has a tool that maybe she can add in the chat that I think you switched to, Alyssa, instead of Rescue Time. So I'd love to know. Megan asks, how long did it take to come up with these? Over time, or was it after a review period? First, I got down an initial set of maybe 5 to 9 that I just pulled, I knew were important. And then as I thought about onboarding team members, I was like, what else am I missing? This used to be part of a bigger document called the JB Manager Manual, where we document all our processes and just the nuts and bolts of everything. And at the top was this little section on operating principles. And I realized this is actually quite important. I'm going to split it out into its own document. And just by, as I write in Pivot, drop the bucket, my dad and I have this thing. You drop the bucket into the wishing well of your brain, and then it comes up with answers. Or Michael calls it boomeranging. You send out a question on a boomerang, and it returns to you with some answers. So just by asking yourself, what are my operating principles? See what you come up with. I was adding to that Google Doc from my phone on the go over weeks as I was remembering, oh yeah, or I would do something in my business and realize, yes, that's got to go in the operating principles document. So it definitely got more refined over time. And returning to Kevin's question, I don't track super hourly in a, let's say, an aggressively monitored way. I do almost no fiddling around on my computer. Like, I don't procrastinate using my computer. I'll do it with books and reading, sometimes on my phone, but I don't check social media. At night, I'll sometimes go on Reddit for like half an hour and try and look at cute dogs and laugh. And there's like different Reddit communities that I really like, such as aw/AWWW, or wholesome memes, or animals being bros. I mean, this is how I use social media, is for like cute animal memes and sometimes political humor. But I'm not someone that worries about distraction time on the computer. For some reason, for the last 8 years, like, I will not even open my laptop to watch a TV show. Even if I'm traveling, I watched Game of Thrones finale on my iPad mini from a hotel room rather than open my laptop, because my laptop is so associated with work for me. It's the only separation I have of, now work is over. Now you can relax, because I work from home. I've worked from home for 8 years. So I just treat my laptop, and I think Michael thought I was crazy that when we first moved in together, he'd want to just go open my laptop at night to go do something or pull something up, or for us to watch a show. I was like, absolutely not. We're not opening that thing. It's as if like some business boss was going to jump out of my computer. That's how seriously I treat the laptop. So yeah, and I'm seeing in chat, Stephanie says, I've been using Harvest, and Alyssa switched to Clockify. She says, as it was exactly the same as Toggl, but doesn't charge for a team. Great to know. Thank you both. I want to make sure we have time. Some of you may have to jump early, but let's keep moving into Momo 3.0, and then I'm happy to answer any other questions that come up. One question that you didn't ask is about the glasses. I'm getting LASIK in less than a week. So this is a big, scary, hairy goal, because it's a little scary to think about going under the knife, even if LASIK is such a normal procedure. Also, it's a big ass purchase that for a long time I felt that I couldn't afford, even though technically I probably spent as much every year on glasses and contacts. But in less than a week, I'm getting LASIK. This is Vision 2020, my goal. So I have to wear glasses for 2 weeks. I've never worn glasses continuously for 2 weeks. And here I am. So now, for posterity, at this webinar, this workshop, will have me with glasses, maybe for the last time in a long time. Caitlin says, my husband just got LASIK last month and he loves it. I watched them do it. I was like, nope, but you will love it. Oh gosh, I'm scared. Okay, well, soon I will see clearly now. Again, Vision 2020, I'm riding that metaphor all the way home. We're going to be doing a lot of it in the fall, and why not start with actual 2020 vision? Speaking of which, let's get into Momo 3.0, 2020 vision. Part of the reason I'm sharing this, and some of you may be watching when this is long past, maybe you're watching this from the future in 2020, but you'll at least see how we think about shifting. Momentum has been around since 2014, and it's evolved so many times. We had Momo 2.0 when Pivot was not yet out, but coming out soon. And I was getting ready for my Oprah moment of my own, that when the book launched, is the community ready? Is it in good shape? Are we happy with how things are set up? And we actually changed the platform from Podio to Facebook. We simplified, made more frequent Q&A calls. And that was part of the Momo 2.0 vision. And then this is our thought process heading into 3.0. I've talked about the team, but this seems like a perfect time to just show you who's working behind the scenes. So Mirasol now will be on special projects, client work, projects like LinkedIn Learning. I'm creating a course for managers on holding one-on-one career conversations with their team. Stephanie is heading up a business, community manager, leader. These are all evolving. None of these are set in stone, but specifically focusing on momentum and just everything in that orbit. Brenna is so much more than a virtual assistant, project manager. She's helping with so many things you can't even imagine. Right now, transitioning everything to Kajabi. And then I work with a pro podcast solutions on now editing the podcast. That's a huge help and sanity saver. And then another Stephanie working on design. So helping refresh my slide decks, the pivot workbook, any materials. One thing an exercise that we did after getting clear on the principles was, who are we serving? Who shows up in the pivot orbit, the pivot community? And I realized it was really 4 types of people. Now I could be wrong, but this is my theory. And maybe one person who watches this or listens will think to write to me and say, I'm none of these. And if you are, cool, I'd like to learn who is the other avatar, or I call them ideal community members. Or just the types of community members we have. Under individuals, there's pivoters. Maybe they're just changing careers or changing companies or changing roles within their teams. So kind of career pivots. Solopreneur is they're actually building a business, whether it's a side hustle or full-time. And then within companies, managers, I'm getting hired a lot now to speak at companies for managers, teaching them how to hold career conversations. And then every now and then people are reaching out because they work in HR or they're looking to create entire programs related to pivot. Solopreneur is where momentum comes in. This is from a book called Subscribed, and I just thought it's a beautiful and perfect illustration of the old business model. You've probably heard the phrase funnel. You have all the ways that you reach out and create free content, and the funnel narrows until someone becomes a customer. Or in this diagram on the left, you have your products, you have your channels of how you reach people, and then you have your customers. And the model ends at the point of purchase, like, yay, okay, you're my customer now, game over, or story ends, business model ends. I love the way that Subscribed illustrates the new business model, which, by the way, we are seeing everywhere, and you are going to see even more. We see it in software as a service. We see it in Netflix. Everything is moving to this subscriber model. Why? Because everybody benefits. It makes subscribers the center of the universe, as they should be, as they deserve to be. So here in Momentum, you are the center of the Momentum universe. It should all revolve around you and what you need and what's most helpful, your ongoing experience in Momentum, not one far away point of purchase or signing up. Business owners love the subscription model because it's recurring, repeatable, predictable revenue. And it's so helpful to be able to know, okay, we have X number of members. That means we're going to earn this next month. You can actually start to predict and plan and hire accordingly and outsource accordingly. And that will allow you to build better experiences. Whereas if you're always selling one-off products, it can be very exhausting. So I'm going to pat myself on the back for the foresight that way back in 2013, when I first started having the idea for what was then called Brilliance Barter, I realized I hated the launch model. I found it so stressful to always have to come up with a new course or product, build out a whole landing page, launch sequence, have the stress of launching, never knowing how much I was going to earn. It was driving me crazy, and it was making me not want to even do this anymore. Once I moved to Brilliance Barter, which became Momentum, now I was only ever launching one thing, and it was Momentum, and I could evolve it and grow it over time and build it with all of you as we go in a way that's super collaborative and allows me to build organically and dynamically according to who's actually in the group and what you need. So that's been really exciting, and I highly recommend thinking about what in your business could become part of this new business model. So even I'm thinking with the podcast, Pivot Insider, is that listeners can help support the show and get one Q&A call with me a month. Great. It's just that way they're getting something in return, but they're also on a monthly subscription until they cancel. Long ago, I moved to a subscription model, even though I didn't call it that at the time, retainer for one-on-one coaching clients. From the earliest days in 2011, I realized how tiring it was to have project-based billing. I never knew who was going to refresh when, how much I'd be earning. As soon as I moved to retainer, clients were on a schedule. Their calls were once a week or once every other week. They were all billed on the first of the month. And I knew at any given time, I needed 5 clients, or I never really had 10, but 5 or more or less. And I knew exactly what I was going to earn from month to month. And I knew exactly when spots would open up. Even Pivot licensing. So I mentioned Google, and there are a few other companies exploring licensing. That's a subscription model. They're renewing every year, hopefully, to license Pivot IP and Pivot materials. The phases that we've been working through. So phase 1 is really about auditing. The current Pivot website, it's been in place now since 2016. So there was a lot of accumulation. I've talked about it like being an old house. Things just start breaking down and getting rickety or getting stuffed. Like the attic is just stuffed full of stuff and it needs to be cleaned out. The Momentum Listening Tour was about deeply listening and checking in. And I'm so grateful to Stephanie, who set up one-on-one calls with many of you to go beyond a survey and really touch base one-on-one. What are you working on? What are your challenges? What would you love to see? During that time, we closed enrollment to Momentum. So it used to be that anyone could sign up and join at any time. I piloted the launch model in the past, and then for a while, I just wanted it to be going in the background, but we actually don't want anybody joining while we continue revamping everything and overhauling behind the scenes. Instead, we're actually doing another big splash launch in the fall so that we feel really ready. So I think sometimes you do need to close the doors to something and work behind the scenes, because it would be very awkward to bring in somebody new right now where we're in a little bit of a in-between state. And then for those of you who are already members, it's just going to get better and better. Like you're not, as long as you're okay with following along as we grow and as we go, there's no downside. We love letting you in behind the scenes, and that way you get to learn what we're trying and thinking about as well. And part of this has been the transition to Kajabi. So there's another session coming up on exactly why we're moving to Kajabi and how we're using it. And I'll walk you through the interface and what we're setting up in there. And I'll explain our whole rationale, because that was a big decision. And it's actually editing out a lot of other subscription services that we used to have. Phase 2 is simplifying, rebuilding the 4 paths. I showed you the 4 community type member types, relaunching the podcast, woohoo, which is now going and back again, and starting to build in these new Momentum offerings. And then phase 3 will be relaunching. And in the fall, I'm actually going to launch a tier of Momentum that includes a mastermind. So I'm not exactly sure the frequency yet, but meetings in New York, day-long strategy sessions. Stephanie and I and Marisol have been so productive on these. And I've done these with VIP clients in the past where we do a one-day strategy session. I'm now convinced they are amazing. You can get so much done. So I'm very excited to offer this highest tier, the mastermind, probably for 10 people maximum. And it will be a much higher priced offering, but something I'm really excited about for people who are really ready to dig in, roll up their sleeves, and meet regularly. And then we're going to do a big new onboarding course as well. So I'll talk more about that in a moment. And another big feature is Momo Mentors, which we're really excited about. This will be starting in 2020. We are only going to offer this to founding members to start. So you all who are here now will be our pilot group, because we want to know that someone's been part of a Momentum for a long enough time to know what the community is and to have been a long-time member before we offer this up. But what we want to pilot, or open to your feedback as we continue to shape it, is that if you have your own community and you want to lead a Momo mastermind of your own within Momentum, it's almost like an affiliate program plus. So it's like affiliate plus, as in you can recruit a pod of 5 or 10 people and you will get an affiliate commission every month, because momentum will be shifting to monthly billing, on your pod of people. So let's say Kevin wants to do a Beyond Burnout pod. Well, we'll take care of all the high level stuff. They'll still get everything Momentum has to offer, but maybe you're also offering Kevin a once a month Q&A call with you, or anything you set up, a half-day sprint on Zoom, anything that actually serves that topic of the community that you care about. And by you referring that group that becomes part of your pod on Moving Beyond Burnout, or however you would phrase it, then again, you'll get that affiliate commission every month. So maybe for some of you, it offsets the cost of Momentum, but it also gives you, I mean, I'd love to, Stephanie and I were talking about it, we'd love to have Momentum members being able to earn $1,000 a month as like a side stream of income from having a pod in a group. If you love Momentum and you really care about it and you believe in it, we certainly don't want you to do this if you feel like, ugh, no way, I am not going to put my name behind that. But if you feel that it's the high level structures would be really beneficial for people in your community, but you don't yet want to go all out of launching the whole kit and caboodle, this could be a really great option and something that we're excited to pilot. Hi, Carol. Great to see you here. As far as timing in 2020, there will probably be 2 launches. So in the first quarter, Stephanie and I love the date 2/20/2020. That might be when we pilot Momo Mentors. So, and Carol's asking, could we have a mastermind group in the UK? Absolutely. The way that it would work is, Carol, you would invite your community through an affiliate link, and anyone who signs up, you would then also communicate with them as your own mini mastermind within Momentum. So you could build whatever else you wanted, whatever other touch points or resources for your specific community or topic area. And then beyond a Momo mentor role, we should definitely do a meetup in the UK in 2020. So thank you for adding that to the list. We'll probably do another listening tour. So we'll be a year from the first one, and then we'll launch again in the fall. So we're going to pilot next year, only doing 2 launches so that we can make sure that everyone who comes in the doors gets enough attention and onboarding. And we'll see how it goes. Maybe we'll end up going back to a evergreen model. We may pilot a evergreen something in the background in there, meaning someone's just signing up for the Momentum interest list, and then at the end of a welcome sequence, they are getting an offer of some kind. But we'll see, and we'll keep you posted with everything we're piloting along the way. Our intentions with Momo 3.0, so you've heard us talking so much about it and plugging it and everything. We want to actively try, and I'm having to move. Hang on one second. I'm moving. There's a chat box directly in my way. Hang on. Okay. We are committed to helping 5x, 10x your income and making Momentum the best investment possible. We feel like, I think getting clear on the ideal community members of Pivot and realizing in the beginning, Pivot was, Momentum was for everybody. Even if you were a career pivoter, I was welcoming like everybody. And once we realized this is really about building a heart-based business, whether as a side hustle or full-time, now we can go all in on helping you earn back not just your investment in Momentum, but really 10x your income. And I've tried in the past, I think I've shied away from emphasizing money too much as like the sole obsession and focus of this community. But I think I erred too far on that side. I think I removed too much focus on that to the point where, what's the point of building a business? We wanted to earn abundantly for you and for the people that you're serving. Creating next level, super actionable resources to get you to 100K. So if you're not already, we're really, I'd say the level of Momentum is hitting solid 6 figures. There are communities out there. I mentioned Hello 7 the other day. That one's specifically for women. There are certainly communities and people that are all about getting to 1 million. If that's the stage you're at, there are definitely masterminds and programs. I wouldn't be the person because I'm not there yet. But what we can do is give you all kinds of different starting points when you're 0 to 100, when you're 100 to 500,000, and really trying to get everybody to that level. Again, always with the intention of whatever you're earning is kind of perfect somehow for that moment of time. What you earn has no has nothing to do with your worth or your smarts or anything at all. But why not aim at whatever's exciting and compelling to you? And 100K plus just means that you actually start to have some systems in place and recurring, repeatable revenue, always with that goal of ease and joy. I know we're going a little over time. I'm sorry. There's just so much in here. So if you have to run, no problem. And we will post the recording, but bear with me. We're almost to the end, and then I'll take questions. So if you have to jump, it's okay. But I'm happy to stay on and answer questions. We are obsessed now with increasingly creating consistent, valuable engagement, connections, and content. We want momentum to have massive momentum as a community, which I think we're getting there. And Stephanie's already been amazing. Marisol was so wonderful getting us going in the first place. And we'll see. We can't force it, but even Stephanie and I don't want to be the bottlenecks of the community getting a lot of traction. The best communities I'm a part of are very engaged because they're super practical. It's people asking, exactly as everyone was asking, what do you use for time tracking? And it's everybody feeling safe and valued and valuable to give and receive feedback. Sometimes giving feedback feels better than even asking for feedback or asking for a favor. It feels good to help people out and share what you're learning, especially as a solopreneur. It can be really rewarding. Like, you sweat over this problem or question and now sharing it back out. That's why I love what I do. It feels like all the toil that I've put in for 8 years, I'd like to condense it into 1 year for you. I'd like to condense everything I've learned the hard way and just give you the shortcuts over and over again. We've said it many times, but our driving principles for momentum specifically are delightful specificity, radical transparency, and crazy smart systems. That is what you can count on us for, and we'll do our best to deliver. Oh, animated again. New additions, we're going to do 15-minute coaching hot seats. I can't claim any credit for this, but I've heard another mastermind leader doing something similar where you can sign up or apply to get a 15-minute one-on-one coaching session with me, and we'll record it and share it back out to the group. So the caveat is that you just have to be willing and have the courage, the bravery to have it be recorded. But I know that everybody listening will get so much out of hearing whatever's on your mind. And this way you can get more one-on-one time in these short little bursts. And I think it's going to be really fun to listen back out to topics that come up. And even for those of you who are coaches, you can learn more about my coaching style. I've been coaching over 10 years now, and specifically how I work pivot into coaching. We're going to have a consistent Q&A call day and time. Hallelujah. The first and third Wednesday of every month at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, unless I'm on a plane. So I'm really going to do my best to stick to this now. In the first few years after Pivot came out, I was on the road all the time, but I'm really going to try to be consistent moving forward so that you know when the heck to show up for calls. I think this is such a no-brainer. And thank you for your patience before we got to this point. In preparing for the fall launch, we're going to create a 5-day set your strategy sprint. So for business planning for 2020, keep an eye out. I'll be doing a webinar, 10 scalable streams of solopreneur income. I counted my current streams of income and it's 10. Doesn't mean they're all like robustly, abundantly flowing all the time, but there are 10 ways that money comes in, maybe even a few more. So I'll share exactly what those are. And Big Gulp will also share my income. I'll show you around my dashboard for the year. And I'm going to be creating an onboarding course, because one thing we realize is that when people join Momentum, we're showing the features of the community, but we weren't necessarily, there was a lot of content that you would just get kind of land in the middle of, like, and here are all the Q&A calls for 4+ years. Here's all the courses we've ever done. It can be really intimidating. Where do you start? We have Momentum playlists, but maybe that's not even really aiming at transformation. So this onboarding course that I'll be creating is distilling everything we talk about in Momentum already into a 10 or so module course called Pivot to Profit, that if I were going to start from scratch, or I was going to walk you through from scratch, Pivot to Profit of building your ideal 6-figure heart-based business, what is most important? So that's what will be coming up. I've got to start hustling on building that, but I think it's really important to create a success path, as Stu McLaren calls it, for a membership community. What is the success path? That when you join, beyond just diving in and introducing yourself, how can we actually help you create transformation in your life and in your business? And as I mentioned, piloting Momo Mentors. So we're really excited about that. You can already get your gears turning if you have a community that you might be excited to invite. We'd love to know who's kind of early interested in this, because that means we can go directly to you and get your feedback as we start to shape that. But I think that'll be really fun. I'm looking forward to trying that. At the end of all of it, an overall dedication to your business transformation based on continuous feedback and what you're building. That's where we need your help. When we put out a survey and we ask for your help, please do what you can to answer, not for our benefit, but because it's very hard to know how we can be most helpful if we don't just ask you directly. So you'll see, we're not going to be afraid to ask, but I would love for you to say, I'm here, I'm showing up, I'm paying for this with my hard-earned money. What do you need at any given moment? It's going to change every quarter, every year. So the only way we can know is ask, and the only way we can know is for you to help respond and chime in. And we're so grateful for all the help and input you've given so far. Which is where I'll end things before I take questions. Thank you. None of this would be possible without you. And I'm especially grateful to those founding members who are here right now, who are on this call, who have given feedback, helped shape momentum, helped create whatever momentum we have is thanks to all of you. And even maybe some of you watching will be part of the new crew in the fall or in 2020. You'll be looking back on this webinar. Again, hello to the future. But these founding members really were there from the beginning, and all of you have helped, and even your patience while we work out kinks or while we figure out what's the best format for things. It means so much. And if you happen to be joining from the future and you're part of Momo 3.0, welcome. And the same can be said. Like, we are going to keep growing this program and making it hopefully insanely useful at every step. And everyone who joins, when you join, you're grandfathered in at that rate. I was trying to think earlier if there's a more gender neutral term like grant personed in. But bottom line is your rate will never raise as a thank you for being here. And whenever you join, whatever future improvements happen, you get to benefit, but we'll never raise the price because I really value you showing up at every step of our transformation along the way. So thank you. And thank you, Kevin. Kevin says, I'm looking forward to all these additions. I really appreciate the focus on helping us generate revenue. That's great. I'm so happy to hear that. Again, I get a little wiggly because money's not the only thing that matters, but why not have some fun trying to get there and build our ideal business models? Would love to open it up for questions. So what's on your mind of everything? I know there's so much that we've covered in this session. What would be helpful? Stephanie writes, so excited. Thank you. And thanks, Carol, for your great suggestions as well. And certainly if you're watching this recording now or the future, let us know. You can always send us a note and react, ask questions, post in Facebook. We'd love to hear that. I think that goes without saying by now. What else? Any questions? I'm going to stop sharing and feel free to pop off mute if you want to. We will share this deck out in case you want to flip back through it. And I encourage you to come up with your own operating principles. At least get down on paper the ones you already have, even if they're somewhat invisible to you, and then have this open call out to your brain where you start tracking over time and adding to it over time. Maybe something that we've done in terms of the Momo 3.0 planning has been helpful already. You can think about it. Also, there's a Pivot podcast episode coming up. By the time you watch this recording, it might be out, but it's episode number 126 on the 2-day strategy sprint that JBE we held to really kick off this new direction. So you'll be able to get the show notes for that at pivotmethod.com/126. And there's even a template on creating your own 2-day strategy, your own 2-day strategy sprint, whether it's just you, it's you and a friend tour. Alyssa and I recently did the How to Find a Business Bestie call, which will also go out on the podcast and is in Momentum. Maybe you do a strategy sprint with a business bestie if you don't yet have a team. But if you do have a team, it's a great way to kind of kick things off as well, or do now it won't go without them. They're so productive. We're going to do at least one a year. Stephanie and I even did a follow-up we thought we were going to do a content sprint for building out some momentum stuff. And it ended up being almost a day and a half of decision making. We didn't even create too much in that second sprint. We just sat there making tons of decisions. And it was really, we got so much done that's going to now cascade and allow us to do many other things. So shout out, Stephanie. Thank you so much. And I'm not seeing any other questions. I know I've already kept you longer than intended. So I just want to say huge thanks again for being here. And if you're watching the recording, and I would love to hear what some of your operating principles are, because it's very true or very much the case that I might be missing some that are important to me too, or that there's something hidden or not working in my business where I'm going to learn some philosophy that you have about how you tackle your work. So I really genuinely want to know, whenever you come up with these, do report back and post in Facebook so that we can all benefit from your responses. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for being here and watching the recording. Have a beautiful rest of your day and week. Bye.